Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend. Color What If with another fiction. What if Deku have the hidden Quirkless power? Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want more videos like this, now let's get into the fanfic. Please, I'd do anything for this wish. A man pleaded a little boy. He had heard from his son that his classmate could grant any wish. Anything? The boy asked. Yes. Are you sure? Yes. You'd pay any price? Yes. All right. What is your wish? I wish for my dog to be alive again. Wish granted. Thank you so much. The person hugged the boy's legs. The wish granter walked away, his duty done. The asker came home, happy about the dog being alive again. As he laughed at the dog licking him, he saw his son, slumped on the couch. When he approached his son to check on him, he realized with horror that his son was dead. He was poisoned, accidentally mixing washing detergent with his usual milk. The man cried once more, this time for his dead son. What he did not know was that his son's life force was being used to restore his dog from the dead. Midoriya Izuku learned of power a few weeks after his 4th birthday. His childhood friend Kaken's lackey Tsubasa stepped in front of a lorry carrying milk to the grocery store and died, just because someone wished that something would happen to him. Izuku had discovered his quirk when the victim that was beaten up by Kaken had wished for this in front of him. Izuku asked him if he would do anything for revenge 3 times, and the victim had said yes. Izuku wasn't surprised after all. Tsubasa was coming back for a second helping on his own. The anger the victim had was almost palatable, so he granted it. He watched as the half-dozen people on the street saw Tsubasa chasing after a ball and ignoring the shouts and yells for him to stop. The lorry threw the boy a dozen feet into the air and landing with a splat. From that moment, the wish was granted. Izuku had another quirk. The quirk he knew the victim previously owned. He smiled as he made objects float with his mind. Lots of children believed or hoped that they could have a powerful quirk, like Kaken. He discovered that day, and in the days to come, that he really had a quirk that could help him. No one ever thought Izuku had any culpability, not even the asker themselves. After all, Izuku was only there to listen to him vent right. Furthermore, his mother had seen the whole thing from the side of the street. Izuku himself was looking at the milk section when that poor Tsubasa had the horrible accident. From then on, if anyone were to ask what Midoriya Izuku's quirk was, little Izuku would call it wish granting. He wasn't completely wrong, since it did grant wishes. It was the perfect quirk for someone who loved helping people, and the perfect quirk to leech benefits off from. Or so everyone thought. Hey, I heard you can grant wishes, right? Can you grant mine? I'd do anything. A classmate caught up to the other that had the quirk he needed for the wish to be granted. A 4-year-old Midoriya Izuku turned to his classmate with a bright smile on his face. Are you really willing to do anything for your wish? Yes, Midoriya. The classmate nodded vigorously. Are you sure? Izuku tilted his head. Yes, Midoriya, the classmate asserted again. You'd pay any price for it? Izuku pressed. Of course, yes, the classmate affirmed, impatient. All right, tell me your wish. Izuku smiled at the classmate. The classmate was excited and told Izuku his wish for a more powerful quirk. After all, Bakugo had a powerful one, and I want to be as strong as him. Izuku agreed to grant it, and did it in a snap. Little did the classmate know about the price that he had to pay for the said wish. Later, the boy was crying. I didn't do it. As police cars surrounded the preschool that he had attended. The building caved in, crushing the poor kids that were inside. Kaken was outside the preschool crying and clinging to his mother, who looked concerned. He was lucky, as he was on the way to the bathroom with Izuku when it happened. Izuku asked Kaken's mother what was going on, while blinking in confusion. However, She merely shook her head and said that children like him shouldn't know about this yet. He heard the police saying something about the children inside being crushed, and the preschool just suddenly caved in. They wondered if a villain got into the preschool to kill the children or something, since the time of deaths were almost at the same time. Izuku watched as the kid was dragged off to the police car, hysterical. He hoped that the kid would love his new quirk. He thought the classmate would enjoy his new quirk. So why did he seem unhappy? The next day, the principal had told Kaken and Izuku that due to the incident, they would have to transfer schools. When Izuku asked why, the principal had replied that their preschool was being shut down. He also avoided the question of where happened to the other kid. Izuku would never know that the kid was actually sent to a mental hospital, as he was too traumatized by the deaths of almost his entire class happening in front of him. The classmate would never get to use his quirk in action. He would never be able to achieve his dream of being a hero. Although his mother Midoriya Inko was concerned about her baby's mental well-being after what happened in his preschool, she was also happy that her son received a quirk that resembled her own. She was unaware that Izuku's real quirk was dangerous, even if no one else could tell. Inko let Izuku spend all his free moments practicing his new telekinetic quirk. Izuku knew he wouldn't tell her his actual quirk, because if he did, he probably can't grant any wishes anymore. And more needed to be found out about it. To everyone, Izuku was like any 5-year-old. He loved to play outside and read hero comics. He seemed to be a happy boy that loved his mother. He had a strong telekinetic quirk and would just increase in strength over time, making people think he was a prodigy, but was also curious. He wanted to see the extent of his abilities and how he could help people with it. Just like that, people would take advantage of it. Izuku would agree, since he was helping them. They were his classmates, not villains. They said they were his friends. Little did they know that there was more to his wish quirk than it meets the eye. Izuku never really noticed the cheers turning to screams later in the day. It didn't matter that strange things happened, like classmates transferring out. After all, their wish was granted. They should be happy, right? That is why when he saw one of his new classmates sitting alone on a swing set in the park, crying his eyes out, Izuku did the one thing he could think of. Why the sad face? Izuku questioned. The Dr. T told me that I'm quirkless. I'm going to have no friends, the boy wailed. Izuku felt bad for him. After all, quirkless people were usually discriminated. He could not imagine a life where he would be bullied by everyone, or even his own friends. Therefore, Izuku decided to cheer him up. He made someone's quirk more powerful. Surely he could grant a quirk to someone quirkless. Don't cry. How about I give a wish to you? He offered. The boy looked up at him. Really? You'd do that for me? Izuku nodded. All you need to do is to answer my questions. The boy nodded back. I'll do anything. Are you sure you'll do anything? Izuku asked. Yes, the boy beamed. Are you sure? Izuku pressed on. Yes, the boy nodded vigorously. No takebacks. You are very sure? Izuku smiled. Of course, the boy laughed. Okay, what is your wish? Izuku asked. I wish I have a quirk, the boy exclaimed, his eyes hopeful, and he had a large smile on his face. The poor, naive boy had sealed his fate at the moment. Izuku said, Okay. The wish was granted. Thank you so much. You're great, Midoriya. But the price of the wish was too much for the boy to handle. Later at home, he fell down the stairs, screaming in pain as his spine was twisted and snapping. He started to convulse, blood coming out from his nose and ears. His mother quickly called the ambulance, crying about her baby as she watched him struggle in agony. Son, please be okay, she sobbed. She screamed as she was being crushed by a toppling fan and dissected in half. Somewhere in the home, the other family members also got crushed, whether by a bookcase falling or the ceiling caving in from poor quality structure. The medical responders finally arrived to the home and found a horrifying scene. A boy who was screaming in pain, and a bloody scene that came straight out of a horror movie. As they strapped the boy to a gurney and shoved him into the back of the ambulance, they called the police and pro-heroes to investigate a possible murder scene. The next day, the boy and some of his friends were not in school. The teacher had announced that the boy is in hospital and would be paralyzed for the rest of his life, along with a life-threatening disease that was undiagnosed until now. Meanwhile, his close friends were also found dead from sneaking into a roller coaster not meant for their heights. As a result, they fell out and hit the ground with a splat. His extended family. They died in the bombing of a shopping mall. What was funny was that all of these events happened at the same time. While everyone was whispering about the accident that killed the kids, what was Izuku's reaction? He was smiling brightly at the teacher, his eyes excited. Was it because he was wondering how the boy was doing in the hospital? No. It was because he was wondering if the boy was enjoying his new quirk. No one ever connected the boy's landing in the hospital to the person who granted him his wish. Not even Izuku. Sure, he suspected. But how could it be? But why would he tell? His quirk was wonderful, giving people what they want. Wasn't that what the boy wanted? It was so easy. The moment he said his wish was wish-granting in his new grade school, he could see their wide grins and the greed in their eyes. It was only a matter of time before someone else came up to him with a wish of their very own. But surprisingly, it wasn't a kid that asked for the wish. It was an adult, and she was crouching on her knees in front of him during recess with a sickly sweet smile. She clapped her hands together and started talking. "Izuku, do you think Sensei can have a wish?" she questioned. Izuku was sitting at a bench, sipping his milk when this was happening. "I can't just grant a wish without payment, Sensei." Izuku hummed. "Please, I'd do anything," the teacher pleaded. That piqued his interest. "Anything, you say?" "Yes, of course," the teacher smiled. "You'll pay any price?" Izuku grinned. "Yes," the teacher nodded. "Are you sure?" Izuku questioned. "Yes," the teacher was eager. "Then all right, tell me your wish." Izuku drank the last of his milk. "Oh, you're such a good boy, Izuku. You're Sensei's favorite student," the teacher gushed. "I wish to be a billionaire. Then Sensei doesn't need to work anymore." Izuku nodded, and at that moment, a rain of banknotes fell down onto them from a blimp in the sky, astonishing the teacher. The teacher quickly gathered up all the banknotes, laughing at her fortune. Izuku watched quietly with a smile on his face. It wasn't a smile that meant he was happy for the teacher's fortune. No, it was a smile that meant he knew what was going to happen next. Later that day, Izuku was watching TV at home about some hero show, when he saw a news story about a currency transport vessel had suddenly gone missing, and when it had been found, all the money had disappeared. It then reported the death of around 60 people, who had died simultaneously from different locations. The causes of death were all different. Izuku looked at the screen and he blinked, as he thought on how his new form teacher was enjoying her new fortune. What he did not know was that she had lost all her limbs, ears and nose from a terrorist attack as a price for the wish, and was now using the money for hospital stays and surgeries to restore herself. When she got out, she would be tried for theft of the money from the vessel. Another day, he went to the library. First of all, he wanted to know more about the psychology of people. Why do they become greedy for a single wish? He was well into his second week of classes before he found this guide called Hidden Desires. It had a very insightful view of human nature and gave a series of arguments of how human nature are blinded by their own thoughts at that instance, and not for the long term. For instance, what they could not have. Izuku shook his head as he waved his hand at the book, and it flew back to the shelf it came from. That was the first time Izuku understood that the more you give, the more people would take, expecting it would happen again. But it's apparent that a quirk could be taken as a price. He just needed to know if the price paid was randomized or could be outright stated. He decided to test it on the people who asked for a wish next. Not that it was difficult, since he saw their eyes when he said his quirk was wish granting. But he never disclosed the full mechanics of it. Of course, he wouldn't tell anyone about this particular decision, either. Izuku prized his privacy and his secrets. Knowledge like this was powerful. He was used to the deaths in the news by now, likely caused by his quirk. He tried to feel pity for the kids, he really did. But then he saw that they didn't care about his well-being or anything. They just wanted their wish to come true. So, he kept this a secret. His decision was cemented when he reached his shoe locker and found a few letters in there. It looked like word spread about his quirk. He smiled. Perfect. He opened the first letter, where the sender asked him to meet after school to talk about something. Judging by the handwriting and pink paper, Izuku assumed that it was from a girl. After school, Izuku went to meet the girl. The girl smiled cutely at him, which made him blush a little. But she wasn't really his type. He knew she had the good fortune quirk, where everything would go well for her. He was spot on, as the girl had begged him to make a popular guy in his school fall in love with her. But, don't you have your good luck quirk? Izuku had asked. I know, but it cannot manipulate feelings, you know. The girl replied. She added the trigger phrase, I'll do anything. Would you give your quirk? He asked, deciding to change the question. Yes, the girl nodded. Anything for him to fall for me. Is the quirk really worth his love? He questioned. Yes, the girl was impatient. You really want to give up your quirk for him? Izuku was puzzled. Yes, the girl was exasperated. All right, I'll grant your wish. He snapped his fingers and watched as the said popular guy came up to her at lunch and asked her out, much to her delight. When he realized he had another quirk, when he started to get good luck, such as getting the last All Might figurine he wanted for free for being the 1,000th customer, he knew what was what now, and began to plan to ensure no one ever learned of this aspect. Izuku was nothing if not cautious. Sure, he did reckless things, but he didn't get caught. Not ever. With his new luck quirk, he was sure he had a good chance. He never learnt that when the popular boy realized she was quirkless, he dumped her. Apparently, he only loved her for the quirk that she had. Out of grief, she transferred schools. She never knew that her wish was the one that caused this misfortune. Midoriya Izuku stalked out of the classroom, ready to kill. The day had been going great until that blasted classmate of his almost destroyed his hero analysis notebooks in a haste to get his attention for a wish. He had enjoyed the analysis hobby, even if it seemed boring to everyone else. Especially since he had figured out heavy wishes, such as giving quirks, editing quirks, or wishing for $1 billion can take lives from those people that spent the most time with the asker, or even those who only just passed them on a train or store or whatever and never interacting. And the wish? Hey Midoriya, I left my notebook at home that has the homework Sirio-sensei assigned. Can I wish for it to appear in my bag? All done with correct answers. Izuku glared at the group, one of who was guilty of almost destroying his notebook. One or both were guilty. Izuku didn't care. He just wanted the problem solved. He'd already killed people. Who would care about another? But no, he had to wait for the phrase to be said before he could do anything. I'll do anything, the boy persuaded. Would you give your life for it to be completed? Izuku questioned. Yes, the boy replied. Are you sure? Izuku was puzzled. Of course. If I don't hand it in, I'll fail. The boy nodded. Are you really sure? Izuku blinked. Yes. The boy was eager. Please grant my wish. All right. Your wish is granted. Sure enough, the homework was found in the bag. Oh, thank you so much, Midoriya. the boy cried, hugging his homework and leaving him alone. Izuku gave an ominous smile as he disappeared from the hallway. It would be the last homework he would ever do. The next day, the teacher had informed the class that the boy wouldn't be able to join them for class. Izuku knew why, as he saw the vase of flowers on the boy's former desk. In the news, it was said that the boy was holding a knife for protection over some horror movie he snuck from his parents' room. He accidentally stabbed his own sister when scared by a horror movie. He stabbed himself when he realized he would get in trouble. He did say he'd give his life to finish that, so Izuku wasn't too surprised. Midoriya, I was looking for you. A new card comes out this week for this game I like. Do you think you can help me get it? I'll do anything. The boy ended up having his sister and grandmother killed on the way home in a car accident, with the card that he wanted. It was supposed to be a surprise for him. Midoriya, I'll do anything. So would you grant my wish for the project to be done, please? That girl ended up having an accident which damaged her brain, meaning she was no longer able to attend school. Furthermore, the project came out with plagiarism, meaning she would have been expelled anyway. Hey Midoriya, my birthday is coming up, and you're invited. I'll do anything for a wish from you. His wish ended up for himself to have $500, which will enable him to make the payment for the toy he wanted. Shortly after, an employee arrives at his home, pronouncing that his father had been killed in a truck accident that crushed his body. The company denied any responsibility for the incident, but made a goodwill payment to the family of the deceased. The payment? It was $500, the amount the child had asked for. I'll do anything for the new eraser head figurine. My mom won't buy it for me. He got the figurine all right, but his mother had found out and saw the news of the missing figurine in the news. Putting two and two together, she had beaten her child so badly that he would never be able to use his legs again. While the mother was arrested, his life was changed forever. Hey Midoriya, I baked you some cookies. I'll do anything for a wish in exchange. That wish turned out to be his big brother to win the next sports festival. His brother did win. However, the brother died from grievous injuries sustained from the final battle. His stubborn refusal to give up cost him in the end. The opponent was also expelled for too much force during the battle. The boy and his family moved out of Japan after that. After that incident, the ring-out rules were introduced. It was too bad. The boy did make good cookies. I wish. Midoriya. I wish. I'll do anything. I wish. Just one favor. I wish. Will you really do anything for that wish? Yes. Izuku's notebooks kept filling up with the results of the wish granting. To him, they were all experiments for his quirk. He had written in code so no one would know about this. He settled back on his bed, content at the results. It turned out that if what he asked was not enough to pay for the severity of the wish, then the quirk randomly took something else that would compensate for the total amount of required compensation, usually to the deterrence of the asker. After all, they all thought that his questions were hypothetical. They were guilty of being greedy, and all of them were selfish anyway. He just served himself and the pursuit of quirk knowledge quite well. Izuku didn't get why the children he saw after the price was paid were crying. After all, they got their wish. So what was their problem? Aren't they happy they got what they wanted? I don't get it, Mama. If they got their wishes granted, why are they crying? Izuku had asked, when the Bakugas were over for dinner. Bakugu narrowed his eyes when he heard that question. He wasn't stupid. While he may not remember the extras that had attended class with him, he certainly could not forget someone like Midoriya. Izuku. No, screw that. Even if he wanted to forget, he doubted he could. Something changed in him after the preschool incident. The first sign he got was when Izuku stopped following him around. However, he did not quite know what it was. After all, his mother had gushed about his new telekinetic quirk to the family. Bakugo inwardly scoffed. Like hell, that was his real quirk. It was likely his childhood friend didn't even tell his mother, as his mother assumed it was telekinesis. Just what was Deku hiding? The next day, he spied on the boy with a notebook on his lap and pencil in his hand, completely ignoring the rest of the class, except to throw them a nasty look when one came too close or got too loud. What he did know was that the first victim and the latest victim had asked Izuku for a wish hours prior. If it were any other classmate, Bakugo would have brought his concerns up with his parents or teachers. But he had seen how they had acted around him like he was someone to be worshipped. To be loved, there was no way they would believe him, considering his explosive attitude. Comparing that to Izuku's sweet, demure and happy-go-lucky attitude, they would just accuse him of being jealous. A lot of teachers would be ecstatic to have him in their class. Besides his quirk, he had yet to miss a single question, already 3/4 of the way through the school year, and caught him attempting to break down a hero's quirk just from a single footage not long prior and succeeding, as well as working with less success on a training regime for different quirks of varying classes. It was maddening. "Oi, Deku!" Bakugo stormed over to Izuku. Izuku didn't look up when he called his name. Only after Bakugo stepped up to look at what he was working on did he move. He saw what looked like a list of different quirks before he snapped it to his small chest and leveled him as dirty a look as he had ever seen. "Yes, Kaken?" Izuku asked, finally giving him a smile. "What did you do to the boy you granted a wish to?" he asked, irritation making it hard to keep his voice level. "Nothing. I granted his wish." "Why, does he not like it?" Izuku titled his head. Bakugo snorted at him. "You know what I mean, Deku. He died hours after the wish is granted." "It's not as if I went to his house and killed him," Izuku frowned. "Though, what else would you expect since you only have one brain cell?" His jaw dropped, and he sputtered in shock. "Deku, you little..." His hands exploded, and he was about to teach him a lesson, only for the teacher to stop him. "Enough, Bakugo, detention," the teacher snarled. Meanwhile, Izuku eyed Bakugo, shook his head and walked off. Bakugo gaped, and then growled under his breath. He had better do something in case someone was in danger from his quirk. "Midoriya, I'm so sorry for Bakugo's behavior. I will make sure his mother knows at once." The teacher told Izuku. "Can I have a wish for this?" Izuku gave a smirk, while nodding. That smirk made Bakugo realize that Izuku's quirk is more than meets the eye. When Bakugo learnt that the teacher's husband left her with a large amount of debt from his gambling habits and her daughter died from drug overdose, he realized he was right. The first time he heard of Izuku's potential for killing was during his second year in middle school. He'd agree on granting the large wishes and asking alternate questions to each asker, seemingly selfless. The thought only passed his mind when bad things started to happen to the students. "But it's not fair, Bakugo." Izuku blinked innocently, green eyes shining. "The moment they find out my quirk, they just gather around like greedy vultures. They got what they wanted, so it's a win-win." "But you killed them, Deku," Bakugo protested. "They knew exactly what they were in for." Izuku serenely pointed. "I did ask them 3 times. But it could have." Izuku abruptly stood, shooting him an eerily calm glare that made Bakugo's usual glare look like a child's. A shiver ran down Bakugo's back. "It doesn't matter what could have been," he said quietly, voice heavy with some unknown quality. "All that matters it is what it is." And then he turned his back on him and walked away. Bakugo decided it was time for an intervention. Izuku had mixed feelings when Bakugo decided to stick close to him, reading the letters of a wish that someone may have, and rejecting all of them in his stead. The boy obviously knew how his quirk works, and seemed to want to keep him safe. He did it well, but Izuku was a powerful analyst. It took a few weeks before Izuku understood why Bakugo was trying to prevent the same fate from others. But he knew no one would listen out of their need for a wish to be granted. There was something useful in this decision, even if Bakugo was particularly callous in how he went about doing it. Then again, he couldn't have been subtle, even if his life depended upon it. He saw the classmates having hopeful looks on their faces. Izuku sighed, opting to look straight at the person while he let Bakugo do the talking. He wondered what faces people would make if he turned down a wish. Would they understand, or would they make him think he's the bad guy? Knowing people's psyche, probably the latter. Ah, Midoriya. So can we go and talk about, the letter I sent? A boy approached them. Sorry, extra. But that ain't happening, Bakugo barked. What you asked for is too much. You should have studied for the test and not secretly played video games. His hands emitted explosions to prove his point. Izuku simply stared blankly, a smile plastered. Midoriya, come on. I thought that you would help a friend out. Another protested. Don't let Bakugo make your decision. A third pleaded. I'll fucking blast you apart, Bakugo yelled back. Izuku finally said, Kaken has been my childhood friend since we were 4. We grew up together. So, what he said usually goes. With that, he exited with Bakugo. Bakugo knew that people would try to ask him for a wish when they were alone. Not on his watch. He'll make sure Izuku was almost never alone with him. It was not difficult, considering they live near each other and go to the same school. It was not for Izuku's safety, but for the safety of others. I feel bad. They just wanted something, and I could have done it, Izuku expressed. Bakugo had to take a long look at him to see if he was joking or not. He finally said, Don't. Their problems are not yours to fix. From now on, make sure to keep that in mind. Those extras are not with your fucking time, and you're not obligated to make them happy. He knew if Izuku fixed it, it'll just make things worse. Izuku hummed in acknowledgement as they two walked on. Hey, Kaken. What, Deku? Izuku turned to face his childhood friend with a serene smile. From the times we've known each other, you never asked a wish from me. Bakugo snorted at Izuku, his hands in his pocket and back slouched. He knew better than to say what he really thought. If Dkeu really had more than one quirk, it was likely he could beat him in a straight-out fight, and he did not need that to happen. If I use your wish, then I would not be the best in my own terms. Bakugo replied, shuddering slightly. I know. I believe that. Izuku smiled. Izuku realized with Bakugo, he now had free time to train. That is, the other quirks that he was willingly given via the wishes they had made. Izuku began to realize that he might be limited in what he could learn and know about quirks, but he could go beyond limits by befriending others. Because of his shy nature and his quirk, he never truly had friends, but now he had a reason to try. He decided that he would declare one of his other quirks as his own original quirk. Maybe having friends of a sort could be useful to the things he wanted to do. Just maybe, Izuku decided he would try. When he got to high school, no more granting wishes for now. Izuku met Principal Nezu 1 month after he successfully tracked the boy down and convinced him he just wanted to talk. It was clear what he wanted, as Izuku had defeated a slime villain all by himself on that day, witnessed by All Might. How he found out it's him, he had no idea. He was sitting in the principal's office at UA, looking at the dog, rat, bear, whatever it was. He was looking at Izuku with a lot of interest. Midoriya. Mr. Nezu, it's nice to meet you, Izuku said politely. Call me Nezu. You have quite the potential for someone your age. Izuku smiled and nodded. I'd like to think I achieved it with my own hard work. That you did, Midoriya, that you did. After all, he wasn't from any prominent family like the Todorokis or the Yaoyurosas. What do you want with me? Izuku went straight to the point. I would like to recruit you to come to UA, Nezu invited. Izuku nodded. I see. But I still have to take the exam, am I right? Surely you can't favor just anyone. I do want an equal chance with everyone else. Nezu looked surprised for a moment. Quite the modest kid you are. Normally, you'd be in the recommendation exams by now. But you don't have anyone to recommend you. So I thought I would put you in the normal exams and guarantee your place. You just have to do your best. You really want me in the school, I take it, Izuku stated. The principal laughed a few times. Yep, a lot of schools would love to have you, with a quirk like yours. Izuku smiled, inwardly thinking of the quirks he was willingly given. I would like to know one thing. Nezu went on. Izuku raised a brow as Nezu started. Do you happen to have all for one as your quirk? Izuku shook his head. What was all for one? Nezu nodded. I see. So you have another way to take quirks. It was willingly given, Izuku stated. I would never steal anything from anyone else. He couldn't say the same for the people that asked him for wishes. Though Izuku didn't know it, this was the moment that Nezu trusted him. After all, in his earpiece, someone was using their lie-detecting quirk, and they detected what he said was true. Nezu knew Izuku did not really have any desires. Izuku was damaged, that was for sure, and the reason he was invited to attend UA was because Nezu didn't actually feel any malice from Izuku. He was quite happy to be left to his own devices. He was only dangerous when pushed. UA was also the last chance for Izuku to turn away from the path he was already following. No matter how good heroes could be, Izuku didn't change. He was set on his course and refused to be moved. Nezu did leave Izuku with one fantastic idea before the boy left. You wouldn't happen to know about the Takoba Municipal Beach Park, would you? Izuku shook his head. It looks like a rubbish dump, but all the rubbish is heavy. It would be good for someone who wants strength training or some quirk training done, since no one ever goes there. Nezu trailed off. Later that night, Izuku threw himself into his new goal, cleaning up the Takoba Municipal Beach Park. Izuku's mind had turned again to the upcoming UA entrance exam. He had put down his quirk as telekinesis after he graduated from middle school. The classmates had long given up on trying to get Izuku alone to grant their wish. He could sense how upset they felt for not having the wish. But it didn't matter. The quirks he had received were all useful for this exam. Especially Fizzy Spirit Conversion, which converted mental spiritual energy to physical energy, allowing the user to go beyond their physical capabilities. It was based on the philosophy that the spirit is indomitable. The good luck quirk he had stolen was useful in leading him to the other quirks. The briefing of the entrance exam was rather annoying, however. A crazy, uptight person just pointed him out in front of many others for muttering to Bakugo. Izuku blinked at the blue-haired boy with glasses, and everyone who were staring at them with hostility. Bakugo put his hand and shook his head in exasperation. He pitied whoever was in the same exam arena as him. Good thing they were going to be separated, since those who went to the same middle school were separated in case they worked together. He knew Izuku was definitely going to make the exam a very unpleasant for everyone else. Start, President Mike announced. After hearing the loud hero's voice, Izuku quickly activated telekinesis and immediately dashed into the city, activating an invisible barrier to trap all the other unlucky saps. What are you doing? There are no countdowns in real life. Follow the boy's example and get out there, President Mike told them. Realizing they were already behind, they started running, only to run into an invisible barrier which prevented them from entering into the city. Ignoring everyone else's yells, Izuku got into action, forcing the robots into airplane form and sending them to the other robots. Now he was surrounded by hundreds of robots who targeted him, and he struck with a hurricane, annihilating the rest of the robots. Honestly, the barrier was a good thing. He'd rather not hear the battle cries or explosions from other people's quirks, or people taking credit for his own kills. He could tell some would do that. Stupid elite boy. Maybe that would teach him to call other people out. As the 0 pointers came out, Izuku simply superheated it, melting it with his hand alone. Next time anyone else called him out, he would see if there was something he could do to make them shut up. Now which quirk besides his original one would work? Who knows? The aftermath of the exam was an odd event. Half the teachers were laughing. Everyone in Izuku's arena was in shock and anger. The other examinees were scheming to figure out what was happening. Izuku knew, of course. He just showed how useless the other examinees were. He couldn't tolerate bullies of any sort, nor can he tolerate deceit. Some were definitely in for the fame, and not the genuine want to learn. He simply weeded them out himself. But the teachers showed mercy and gave them another exam to take, along with an interview. Izuku, of course, was exempted from it. After all, he did receive 1,000 points for the entrance exam. Not for the first time, Izuku thought he may have made a mistake. Then he caught himself, remembered that there wasn't anything new if he revealed it. He still remembered the greed the children, and even adults, had in their eyes. No, it would only be viable if he wanted to outright kill the person. Boredly, he felt around for his analysis notebook, contemplating pulling it out to work on his latest pet project, ways people could have covered weaknesses. It was challenging considering he was working with little to no information about the quirks he had observed. Just as a bright smile began to appear on his face, as he decided to bury himself once more in his analysis, he was distracted by an outburst from Kaken. Bakugo Katsuki stormed over to his table, yelling, "What the hell did you do at the test site?" This had everybody interested. They wondered what the blonde boy had meant. Izuku maintained his easy smile. "They said we could do anything, so I did. Sorry about that, Kaken. TCH, whatever. Just don't think this means you're better than me. We're equals," his childhood friend declared, staring down Izuku. Izuku smiled demurely. "Of course, Kaken. I wouldn't dream of it. After all, you know what happens to people who have delusions." For one split second, he saw Bakugo gulp, and then he smirked. "We'll just have to see," he said, stomping back to his seat, which was in front of him. He then imperiously swinging his legs onto the table. A girl with bob brown hair and the same guy who snubbed Izuku entered, and the girl pointed. You prevented us from taking the exam and scored all the 1,000 points." Izuku sighed in irritation, the smile dropping off his face. He glared at the glasses boy. "I hope you have learnt your lesson in calling me out when I did nothing wrong." Before anyone could do anything, the yellow sleeping bag unzipped, revealing their new homeroom teacher. He told them to get changed into their gym uniforms and meet him outside. Throughout the quirk apprehension test, Izuku felt irritation towards Minta. Izuku didn't care what redeeming qualities he had. He was a pervert towards the girls in his class. He decided he wanted the problem solved. Izuku already killed multiple people in his short life. Who would care about another one? Minta was a little better than those greedy people who asked for wishes, so Izuku already knew how to play that game. The problem was that Minta seemed to never stop fantasizing about a girl, like they were an object. He was someone completely motivated by what he could get out of it. If it was a girl, even better. No, Minta was a hazard and would have to be dealt with. He knew how to manipulate this into his favor, and left a note that looked like it was from a girl. That would get the sucker alone. Izuku disappeared from the cafeteria to the meeting place itself. Sure enough, Minta arrived, looking for the girl that showed an interest in him. Another useless student would be departing UA soon, as he listened to Minta's wish. Hours later, Minta had been found by Aizawa trying to plant Yamomo's underwear inside Ada's locker. Izuku knew that the prevailing theory would be that Minta had practiced some sort of depravity with that underwear, and tried to leave them somewhere to implicate someone else. A perfect plan, save that Minta slipped on a banana peel and bashed his head in on a staircase while he was fleeing the scene. Izuku began working on a circle of friends after this. He helped them out with training, sought their opinions on a wide range of issues, and supported them in their activities and interests. By the time the USJ was over, he had Uraraka, Ida, Jiru, Yaoyorozu, Asui Kalmitsuyu-chan Kirishima, and a reluctant Bakugo among the circle. He had read psychology and observed their interests in order to be able to convince them. Izuku tried subtlety as well and found it worked for him. A portion of the group was currently up to its eyes in books on the history of the sports festival. Yaoyorozu insisted that Izuku help her in the library. Some of them, like Ida and Bakugo, decided to join them. "Are we done?" Izuku questioned. Yaoyorozu wanted to argue. Everyone had basically memorized the formatting of the sports festival and felt that they were ready for whatever was to come. But she nodded her head. "Great. Who needs my analysis notes? Just in case you want the suggestions on expanding your quirks." Of course, everyone was game. It was 10 minutes before the school library closed when Izuku managed to design the other possibilities they could train their quirks. "I want to train in that way," Yaoyorozu declared, looking at Izuku's notes. Ida looked at Izuku's notes on his quirks. "I do, too. I do want to cover my weakness and develop a fighting style in case I stall, and I don't like that." Kirishima looked at his notes. "I don't know how hardening can be a fence, but I'm game, too." "We'll start tomorrow," Izuku nodded to them, smiling brightly. Before the sports festival started, Todoroki had approached and declared war on him or something. Izuku merely gave him a blank stare and looked down, trembling. Everyone thought he was trembling with fear. However, in reality, it was from laughter. As he walked past Todoroki, he whispered, "Tell that to me when you don't use only half your quirk." If anything, he had the upper hand. After all, while Todoroki only used half his single quirk, he had more than one quirk to play with. Todoroki approached him again after the cavalry battle. Izuku mused that he might be angry losing both rounds to him. Then again, what did he expect from a perfectionist who wanted to defy his shitbag of a father? Izuku listened to Todoroki's story, and he said, "Do you know my original quirk is wish-granting?" He sensed a foreboding presence. He knew it was the father, and he attributed this to his good luck in play. Todoroki widened his eyes as Izuku went on. "Greedy people come to me, wanting what they do not have. Only coming close because they want a wish. Even adults." Midoriya, Todoroki looked shocked. He then stood up from leaning against the wall, giving him a sad look. However, he was anything but. "You can imagine my childhood. People kept trying to guilt me because I refused to grant a wish. I may not know what it was like to have abusive parents, but I do know what it is like to be surrounded by greed, lies, and deceit." With that, he walked away. He made sure to have his head down. Before his match with Todoroki, he met that man. In fact, he actually entered his waiting room. "Midoriya Izuku," he said gruffly. "It is good to see you looking well." The man waited for some sort of response, but true to what he had heard about him, the boy almost never spoke. However, he did have a smile on his face. Izuku narrowed his eyes slightly. He knew that man was familiar, now that he had looked him over. After all, he was the same presence he felt, and he was definitely Todoroki's father, if the fire was anything to go by. "My name is Todoroki Enji, and I am the number 2 hero. Have you heard of me?" Endeavor asked. "Obviously." Izuku couldn't help it. His soft voice rasped out the nonchalant "obviously," and he stared at the man like he was dirt on his shoe. This encounter was getting weirder by the second. Endeavor smirked. "You heard of me, and I'm sure you know what I want. I heard you can grant it for me." Suddenly Izuku knew why Todoroki hated his father so much. He always used others. "You didn't think I would leave my own son alone now, did you?" he went on. Izuku scowled. This man really eavesdropped on his son and his conversation. Endeavor chuckled. I can see from your expression, you know what I'm talking about. Good. It makes my job easier. To put it simply, I want a wish to make my son stronger and to use his fire. Izuku couldn't help it. He laughed. Endeavor suppressed the shiver that threatened to run down his spine at the light laughter. There was something serene yet creepy about it. Is it really what you want? Izuku had asked, narrowing his eyes. People really lose themselves in greed, you know. Obviously. My shadow is to surpass all might, the man replied. I'll do anything for that to happen. Izuku scowled again. He was beginning to annoy him. All right, but you have to answer yes to all three of my questions. And if I say no, Endeavor questioned, huffing, then I can deny your wish. I would be forced to grant it if you say yes to all three. Izuku shrugged. Think carefully. Endeavor frowned at the strange kid. His voice had a strange quality, almost as if he was using another quirk on him. However, he knew that the boy shouldn't have more than one quirk right. What he did not know was that Izuku had endured the greed, lies, and deceit of society that corrupted his love to help. In return, they had made person who thirsted to know more about his gifted quirks and what he could do with it. Of course, I'll answer your questions. Izuku chuckled at the thought of his previous wishers. Images of what happened to them flashed in his mind, and he smiled broadly. No one ever suspected he had some sort of a connection to the recent deaths that resulted from a severe wish. Endeavor ignored that disturbing smile and continued. Well, boy, are you willing to sacrifice your quirk for this? Izuku asked, pushing on his compelling voice quirk. Yes, Endeavor answered. Are you willing to risk your image to achieve this? Izuku went on. Yes, Endeavor replied. Are you really sure about this? Izuku pretended to frown. I am sure. Now hurry up and grant it. Or I'll tell everyone your quirk, Endeavor huffed. Izuku sighed, but granted the wish. He secretly removed Endeavor's memory of the conversation with the memory erasure quirk. Just as he did it, the match between himself and Todoroki was announced. Izuku left Endeavor behind, knowing there were no cameras there. He was glad. He decided to keep the memory erasure quirk. That meant that Endeavor wouldn't have blackmail on him, and can't tell on him at all. He was sure Endeavor wouldn't die, because he had loads of energy to spare. However, it didn't mean that there weren't other ways the price would make itself known. It also didn't matter when the wish was granted. He still won the sports festival anyway. Hours later, Izuku found himself with Hellfire. There was also news that they found enough evidence to convict Endeavor. The trial, as it was arranged, short and to the point. Endeavor spoke for almost 30 minutes, covering every question the attorney, someone named Kurobane Shiki, had asked him. It was beyond clear that Endeavor didn't deserve to be a hero with what he did to his family. The most disturbing part was where the hero had admitted to collateral damage and deaths of innocent civilians while apprehending villains. Izuku could not help but wonder if the attorney had some sort of mind control quirk. There was no way Endeavor would admit it that easily. Then he realized. Kurobane Shiki was given the title of ultimate lawyer for a reason. The verdict? Guilty. A jury member then raised the question of Todoroki Rei. Because of the selection of the invitees, there was no debate or question. That Todoroki Rei would be seen by psychologists to see if she was fit to care for her children. Further actions included revoking Endeavor's hero license and setting up a compensation fund for Todoroki Rei. Writs were issued for the people who worked for Endeavor regarding their roles in the affair. Specifically, in their roles landing Todoroki Rei in the hospital and letting the children suffer under Endeavor. Izuku enjoyed the exposure of domestic abuse. It was a capital crime to him. It was just a bonus that he had another entry for his wish-granting notes. He pondered something as he watched Endeavor be taken away. What did he really believe in? Izuku decided to leave Todoroki alone for now. However, there is something off with Todoroki. He couldn't help but feel like he was missing something. Todoroki seemed upset about something. Izuku thought he still loved his father, but the look was directed to him. Personally, he couldn't care less what was going on in Todoroki's head. He wasn't a detective or anything. Also, that could wait. There were more pressing matters to think of, such as the internships and hero names. He settled on the lucky hero, Gambit. Ida went after Stain during the internship period. Izuku went after him. That was when Stain realized that Izuku was a possible murderer. Everyone was fighting hard, trying to keep Stain back from killing Ida, only to ask Izuku why he was holding back on him. Izuku never answered, until he cut Ida. Ida fell to the ground, clearly hurting. Stain only had a fraction of a glance at Izuku's face at this, but it chilled him to the bone. Emerald green eyes looked almost black, blazing with rage as he flew through and attacked relentlessly. His good luck quirk allowed him to keep Stain at bay alone. Stain thought he saw something else in his eyes, but pushed it to the back of his mind. Someone he thought was sweet, heroic and willing to protect his friends shouldn't be looking at anyone with bloodlust. But that faith was shaken shortly after. It was clear that Izuku wasn't any different from himself. He might have seen the dark side of society. He would have made a good apprentice, in fact. During the fight, blood was everywhere. It was even on him. Izuku needed a while to realize that the blood was also his. Was that how those people looked like when they paid a price with his quirk? By the time the heroes found them, Stain had been bloodied and apprehended. Izuku stood there, his back taut and hands shaking. For the first time, he was so angry, he was unrecognizable. Izuku had left the hospital ward not long after the police talked to them, but a worried Todoroki had tracked him down to find him sitting at the lobby. His eyes were not their usual spark. Instead, there was something hollow about it. "You need something," Izuku said to him, tone strangely bland as he stared off into the distance. Todoroki sighed. It was true. While he wanted to comfort Izuku over Stain, he also needed a favor from him. However, he knew just how Izuku took to the people that asked him for a wish. He didn't want to be like them. "It's all right, Todoroki," the greenette said gently. "I know you won't say anything about my quirk. Still, I must warn you, fate should not be taken lightly. I'm not here to ask anything for myself," Todoroki admitted. "I want to ask something for my mother." "What happened now?" Izuku asked softly. "My mother's release from the hospital is being delayed. The lawyers that worked for my father are trying to appeal to overturn his verdict. They are making us think that our father didn't do anything bad to us," Todoroki explained. "I'll do anything just for them to stop. I just want my mother happy and out." "Ah, so gaslighting." Izuku nodded knowingly. He decided to help Todoroki. After all, he also needed new notes for his own quirk. He didn't think there was anything wrong with his quirk. Those who selfishly tried to change fate paid the price, right? "Would you pay any price for this wish?" Izuku had questioned. "Yes." Todoroki nodded. "Are you sure?" Izuku asked, pressing on. "Yes," Todoroki affirmed. "Are you really sure?" Izuku inquired, tone bland. "I'm sure," Todoroki confirmed. "All right, what is your wish?" Izuku asked the compulsory question. Todoroki told him, and Izuku had granted it. "Thanks, Midoriya." He expected Todoroki to leave like all the others, but he didn't. Instead, he stayed to comfort him over Stain. How unusual, Izuku had thought. Another unusual thing was that nothing had happened after a few hours. Except he got unusually tired. It was like Todoroki had paid no price at all. Todoroki never mentioned anything bad happening to him. He was currently trying to figure out what could have prevented a price from being put on Todoroki. He called the person that had known his quirk for a long time and observed from a distance. Bakugo. He picked up the phone long enough to say, well, duh. He didn't make a wish for himself. He made it for someone else. It's not a selfish wish at all. Now I'm going to go, because I'm busy. His words shocked him to the core. He immediately went through his previous entries. He was hoping that he would find something contradictory. But his writings only confirmed Bakugo's words. He realized two things. Todoroki Rei was already on her way to being out of the hospital. He simply hastened it. Other wishes were to outright change fate for their own benefit, unlike this one. The second thing was, the wish Todoroki made was not made for himself, but for someone else. That meant that the only way to circumvent the price was to wish for something both unselfish and positive for somebody or somebody else. After all, the wishes he had granted so far were either greedy or self-serving. Izuku nodded knowingly. This knowledge just strengthened his belief that the victims his quirk had claimed did deserve what they got in the end. Taking the final exams should have been a simple matter. The written was simple enough. After all, he had gotten first in the midterms exam. He, together with his group of friends he supposed, got together every day since the announcements to train up for both the practical and the written. While Momo was great in tutoring those who didn't do so well in the midterms, looking at you, Ashido, Kaminari. It didn't matter if she wasn't good in the practical. Leave that to Izuku. Momo was all too happy to lend a backyard for him to help train up the others for the practical. Izuku could quickly discover that fact that Momo's confidence was wavering ever since the sports festival. Ever since her loss to Takoyami and her internship, something just seemed off with her. What she needed was to improve on her confidence and combat skills. He could tell while she was great at her quirk, she wasn't too good at improvising on the spot. If this was observed by the teachers, Izuku guessed that their practical was somehow designed to target their weaknesses. What was his weakness? That's a door he never thought to open. There were plenty of them, he supposed, hiding behind a mask, never letting anyone very close. Somehow, he doubted his wishing quirk would help him in this one. He realized that on the practical, he was paired with Todoroki, and they were up against Aizawa. That was when he realized that Aizawa could erase his quirk any time. Suddenly, he realized what the school thought his biggest weakness was: his over-reliance on his quirks. He spent so much time analyzing and practicing his quirks and wondering on the capabilities. They likely thought he wasn't so good at quirkless fights. And they were right. Izuku hid behind Todoroki's ice as he looked over the notebook he always kept on him. He reread Aizawa's information silently. His fighting style involved the cloth thing. I wondering if fire could solidify it. Izuku heard Momo mention this before. Good thing he made friends, even if it was for information gathering. He is likely waiting on the otherwise for us, so I won't be surprised if he attacked the moment the ice is down. Izuku had never faced a battle with more seriousness. He could think up of half a dozen strategies, but he really did want to analyze Aizawa's fighting style more, and he couldn't with the ice in the way. Got any ideas? Todoroki asked him, making him look up. Izuku inwardly started working on an anti-style against Aizawa, something that was about as unpredictable as was possible. He needed Todoroki to hide his presence for this, however. Within 5 minutes, Izuku had his plan ready. He tore through the ice, seemingly charging against Aizawa. He didn't use any quirk, but the running head-on was enough to distract Aizawa for Todoroki to use his fire and reactivating Izuku's quirks. Izuku never repeated a move during the hand-to-hand against Aizawa, going fiercely on the offensive. It was enough for Todoroki to get behind Aizawa and capture him. Aizawa asked Izuku about his new fighting style after he was captured. Izuku smiled. It isn't a style, Aizawa-sensei, Izuku admitted. I'd certainly call it a style, problem child. I didn't see anything you did coming. Obscurity isn't what I was aiming for, sensei. Izuku shrugged. Could have fooled me. Aizawa frowned. It was meant to be unpredictable, Izuku answered. I made it up on the spot after brushing up on your style. It was. It really was. Aizawa nodded. I'm proud of you. Izuku closed his eyes. Would Aizawa still say that if he knew what his original quirk did? Izuku had come across a really nice tidbit a few days before summer camp was due to start. He'd been preparing for the summer camp and went with his friends to the shopping mall for some supplies. Only he got cornered and held by Shigaraki, threatening the lives of the other civilians if he said or did anything. Izuku stalled him, asking questions. With his good luck quirk, he got the answers he needed, including who leaked the information to him in the first place. Little did Shigaraki know, Izuku had other ways of fighting. Izuku had made his way to the basement instead, Shigaraki following. He knew Shigaraki was banking on his heroic personality, where he would never harm or kill anyone. He was talking about Stain and the summer camp the whole way, which alerted Izuku that they knew. They knew about the upcoming training camp. Do you have a wish? Was what he asked next. Shigaraki answered, and he got it. As soon as they reached the top step, Izuku took out a penknife and swiftly sliced his hands, forcing him to let go. Izuku then kicked him down the stairwell towards the parking lot. His fear fueled the good luck quirk, which made a car came screeching by to run him over. Shigaraki died seconds later of massive blood loss. The realization of how his other quirks can interfere with the timing of the price kicking in sunk deep into him. Police came to the scene less than an hour later, shocked at the bloody scene. It was like someone crushed a body and painted it all over the road. Detective Tsukachi supervised the crime scene. This was not unusual being in a hero world, but his background in law enforcement drove him to be curious by everything and be sure that things started going the right way for once. What was Shigaraki's wish? It was for his boss to acknowledge his desire to have his own path. Izuku was mildly shocked, but he wasn't terrified over what he did. In fact, he was focused on something very interesting. Monomanito had been antagonizing Wano for a while now. He was the one who had tried to rub salt in the wound after the Stain incident. He was the one who had tipped the League of Villains about the training camp. Monoma needed a bit of a reward, didn't he? Luckily, the training camp lasted a few days, and Monoma would be with them as well. Izuku would have a few moments to prepare a strategy to take him out, something special. Izuku's mind turned through all the lethal options he had available. At least the first day of training camp was on a beautiful day. Izuku enjoyed the sun. He'd gone through training. It was frighteningly strenuous, so to speak. Monoma had accepted the role of a spy to fill up his days and his wallet, too. It didn't hurt that he'd be able to keep an eye on Midoriya Izuku from time to time, although he was in a different class. Midoriya had a role to fulfill for All for One, that is. For some reason, All for One had an interest in him and wanted him to be captured. Who knew what it was, though? Regardless, the attack commenced at night during the courage test. Izuku went into the battlefield and looked muscular in the eyes. The duel began. Izuku led with a telekinetic attack, launching trees at the man, only for him to punch them apart. The debris resulted sent Izuku flying, but he landed back on his feet. Izuku then shot Muscular with a punch, which was mostly tanked by Muscular. Izuku blinked, frowning. That was a little strange. From the looks and functions of the quirk, he could tell that Muscular had some form of muscle manipulation. Physical attacks likely would not work on this person. In fact, Muscular wasn't dodging or shielding, and he was going all-out offense. Then, let's use fire. He set fire to the entire forest, knowing he was alone anyway. He was sure he could wear down Muscular with other energy-based quirks. He formed a barrier of fire, preventing Muscular from getting close. He then decided to shoot the fire at Muscular, using telekinesis to close a fire pillar on him to wear him out. After all, durability meant nothing if your muscles are suffering burns. It was a combination attack with 2 quirks, definitely not the kind of thing taught at UA, for a single person, at least. Unless you're Todoroki. Izuku simultaneously superheated the dirt on the floor into glass projectiles and hurled them at Muscular. Since his mobility was limited by the fire, it pierced him, causing him to scream in pain. Just as he was about to finish Muscular off, Toga and Dabai came barreling in, attacking Izuku as well. A telepathy quirk made Izuku realize they were all after him. And he was alone, facing 2 more villains. The black-haired and scarred villain had a glare on him, but was looking at the fire Izuku had in his hands, instead of at him directly. Blue fire emitted from his hands. For the first time, Izuku was in trouble. Izuku shot a flechette storm of glass projectiles at Dabai, who burnt them with blue flames. Izuku dove out of the way, and his good luck quirk ensured it hit Muscular instead. He blocked an attack coming from Toga and hurled her to the floor, charging towards Dabai. He banished Dabai's flames to the sky to alert any others to come to his location. He backflipped away from Toga's knives, gripping her. However, Dabai's flames almost licked his arm in the process. It forced him to let go of Toga. Izuku continued flinging attacks with all that he had. He knew that if he let up for even 1 second, they could get him, and it would be over. The attempted capture angered the student. He didn't need to hold long, as aid came in the form of Takoyami, Todoroki, Shoji, and Bakugo. During the ensuing fight, they did not notice Mr. Compress was lying in wait, and captured both Takoyami and Izuku. When Aoyama, who was also hiding, shot a naval laser, causing Mr. Compress to drop both marbles in his mouth, Todoroki and Shoji dove for them. Shoji managed to get the one containing Takoyami. However, Dabai got the one containing Izuku before Todoroki could get him back. Bakugo screamed as he watched Izuku get sucked into the portal. Monoma retired to the cabins after this, satisfied at the result. He had a craving for lemonade. He poured the concoction into a glass from the thermos flask. It was a good thing that he prepared this beforehand. Monoma sipped one of his favorite beverages, pondering over the Midoriya Izuku that he had observed. That boy had undeniable brains. He had indomitable power as well, that likely had potential to exceed everyone else. Monoma wondered how Midoriya managed to acquire that much power, when he was the same age as him. Did he used to work for All for One too? That may explain why All for One wanted him back. He continued sipping on the lemonade and wondered if the sugar was getting to him. His heart was starting to beat erratically, and he started to cough. He keeled over, glass shattering on the floor. The blonde boy was dead. When the autopsy was performed, it was revealed that it was from barium acetate poisoning. Few recognized that this compound was a mordant for printing textile fabrics, especially for paints and varnishes. Did Izuku know this fact? Yes. Speaking of Izuku, he stood in front of All for One, who had a wish. He took Izuku's compelling voice quirk to interrogate Izuku about his wish-granting quirk. Izuku had monotonously explained that his quirk did not really have any set price for a wish, and he needed answers for 3 questions before granting it. If All for One said yes to all 3, then he cannot deny the wish. But All for One wasn't stupid, like the rest of the other victims. He knew he had to make sure that there were no repercussions to getting what he wanted. And what he wanted was to be able to kill All Might with his own 2 hands. However, he was smart. While he said the trigger phrase, "I'll do anything," he would say no to something he wasn't willing to pay. That way, perhaps that price wouldn't be paid. So, when Izuku asked the obligated 3 questions, he said yes to giving up one of his quirks, since he could always take it back with All for One. He said no to giving up his villainous ways. He said no to giving up All for One itself. Let's see how the boy gets around that. Izuku nodded and asked for his wish. All for One told him, and Izuku granted it. Little did he know of the chaos that it would bring next. Hours later, the battle was over. The aftermath? All Might was killed, yes. However, there was an army of villains drowning in their own blood on the villain's side. It turned out the Namu that they had created with the quirk stolen from Izuku himself went on a rampage, killing those at the scene with its good luck. Unbothered, Izuku acquired All for One as the price, taking back the quirks that were stolen from him. The expression on the dying All for One meant he did not appreciate the price of the wish. His eyes were shining with hatred at the boy that thwarted him. Before you took my quirk, I whispered that you wouldn't ask how to avert my quirk, Izuku admitted. He chuckled softly. I guess the quirk never cared about the price in the first place. It chooses what would make you suffer the most. He stepped on All for One's throat. But guess what? All Might has passed on his legacy to someone else. His legacy will live on, while yours will die. A flicker of satisfaction lit in the emerald orbs as All for One drew his last breath. By the time his classmates found him, all he said was, "They're dead. But it's over." He knew, at that moment, that it was time for the new and improved Midoriya Izuku to make his appearance. The main villain was gone, and he knew it was time to work his way to the other villains. He was going to follow this goal, and no one was going to get in his way. All for One may be gone, but there was someone else in operation. Izuku copied the complete set of records Nitai had on Overhaul and his plans. It was brutal, ugly reading. With the knowledge he'd acquired from sneaking papers on leads from Sir Nitai's office, Izuku quickly rounded up multiple members of the Shy Hasakai. They were really suckers for wishes, although it took good luck and compelling voice to achieve this. He took them down and hauled into prison after interrogating them with his compelling voice quirk. Izuku spent a few hours studying everything that the members had told him. It looked like he had a quirk that mutated into a more powerful one. Izuku pondered on what his quirk factor may be, and remembered that he usually used his hands to gesture, according to the members. Does it mean if he sliced his hands off, they can't work anymore? He pondered this as he went on patrol with Mirio, the latest holder for One for All. Eri managed to escape her imprisonment, and ran into Izuku in the alleyway, only for Overhaul to be there, claiming to be her father. Overhaul knew little about Izuku, and even less of what he did. On the other hand, Izuku knew much of Overhaul, thanks to his members who were sitting in jail. Too bad that Overhaul underestimated him, as they engaged in battle. Izuku made sure to stay on the air and to aim for the hands. He would save the little girl, even if it cost him everything. He really hated people using others for their own benefit. He sliced at Overhaul's hands, and Overhaul tried to keep his hands back. That made him sure that his hands were needed. He used telekinesis to redirect his quirk attacks and Hellfire to keep him at bay. He used compelling voice to force Overhaul to stop guilt-tripping Eri, all the while keeping Eri at his back, trying to soothe her. However, deep inside, he was angry. Because of his rage, Izuku lost all sense of what was going on around him. He was only focused on one thing: to defeat Overhaul, even if he had to use his vile quirk to steal it. He was only brought back to reality. He heard Eri crying into his back, eyes closed. What was more, Overhaul's anguished scream was mixed with that sound. It was then that he realized what happened. The man's arms were blown off from his own quirk, stolen by Izuku. Izuku knew that he would die from blood loss with his arms missing. Eri was probably crying from the blood, likely having seen a lot of her own from what Overhaul did to her. He saw the blood of the blown-off arms covering half the battlefield, and on himself and Eri. He liked it. By the time Mirio arrived, Izuku had already apprehended Overhaul. He found cloth for makeshift bandages to stem the bleeding for Eri's sake. However, he was still somewhat tired from the fight. It did take quite a while to get close enough to touch Overhaul. After getting scolding from Nightai for interfering with his investigation, he relented and conceded that he did well against an opponent like Overhaul. He also made arrangements for Eri to have a guardian. It turned out Overhaul was using her blood to make quirk-erasing bullets. At least no one had been hit yet. Nightai had ordered Izuku to destroy the stock, which he happily did. However, they did not know if they had been widely distributed. Strangely enough, a few hours later, Overhaul died from a bullet wound. It turned out the police apprehending him recognized him as the one who killed her family and avenged them by shooting him while he was helpless. They had a lot to do if they were going to fix the damages that were caused by the villains. The short mouse, bear, dog, whatever he was, he stood up and walked to the podium. He looked out on the vast crowd in front of him, here to attend either their children's graduation or to catch a glimpse of the future heroes that would grace their earth. Dreams never do come true in exactly the ways we expect them to. In fact, I am sure that our best student, Midoriya Izuku, never expected to become the symbol of peace before his graduation. Sure, he dreamt of it, but he never expected it to come true that soon. He was all this and more. He was a friend, a savior, and a protector to all those in the school. It is my pleasure to have him among the graduates, and as our valedictorian, Nezu said, smiling. Izuku looked at Eri sitting among the crowd and smiled. The bit about dreams was very true. Izuku had always hoped to be loved and acknowledged in a positive way, and not because of what people can get out of him. There were far too many people with selfish desires, who only cared about what they did not have. People like them would never see the light of day again. No one knew of the truly vile things Izuku's original quirk had done and continued to do. No one knew that he was behind the deaths of the greedy, the liars. He used his image as the pure, innocent, sweet cinnamon roll of the class to deflect suspicion. The fact that his quirk needed a few hours to decide on the price helped matters. Now, he held the title of Big Three alongside Todoroki and Bakugo for the last time. The list of accomplishments Nezu listed about him and his class to an extent continued to the point where anyone would be embarrassed. Izuku waited for Principal Nezu to finish and stood up after he gave the floor to him for his speech. Thank you all for coming today. It has been my privilege. Izuku started his valedictorian speech. Brilliant and charismatic on the outside, and cunning and scheming on the inside, and beloved for all that he had done. Izuku's tactics, his resolve, and super good luck made him the most dangerous hero in training in history, even comparable to the pro heroes. Not the one with the highest body count or the most fearsome reputation, but the only one to fully and totally win everyone else over. Izuku had always been lucky. Izuku would always win. And the best part? People loved him for it.